We have opening words from our esteemed actor from quick from a run in Asheville and a successful production. He's going to give us opening words.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First, let me apologize because I didn't know I was doing opening and closing words till this morning. I don't know how that happened and why I wasn't the greeter, but I've been out of town for 2 months, so I may be behind somehow. So I decided essentially to do this off the cuff and talk about something for a few minutes that is personal. And so I have recently had the opportunity to start thinking about friendship and exactly what that means and how important it is. And in that process, to think about humanity. Friendship is one of those things that is chosen. It is not family, it is not your spouse. We need to think about how our friends and friendships are the people that have decided to allow us into their lives. For all of our quirks and weaknesses and irritating little habits, these people have decided somehow that we are worth being in their lives, that they care about what we do, they care about how we are, they want to help and assist us as we move through our lives. And in thinking about humanity in this line, what I have come across throughout my life is that these friendships remind me of our essential humanity, that we are in essence all the same, that given opportunities, my friends and the friendships I have continue to allow me to believe that most people are like me, that they want to, given their own opportunities, wish to help, wish to make things better. Despite all the chaos we may be inundated with right now, I think it pays to remember that ordinary folks like you and I essentially want the best for each other. This is what my friendships and my relationships remind me of, and what I've had the opportunity to embrace and think about over these last few weeks by the people that have supported me and that I can continue to talk with, have relationships with, and who apparently think kindly of me, and I in turn think kindly of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. That sounds to me like kind of the very essence of what we are or what we hope to be. So thanks for those words. Well, our speaker today is someone you will recognize from his recent frequent visits here. DJ Passey is a PhD student at UNC studying mathematical modeling, machine learning, and data science. He's an AI resident at Google's incubator for sci-fi technology, X, the Moonshot Factory, where he works to develop solutions to problems in social justice. Please welcome DJ.
Hello, everyone. Just to start out, I'd like to thank you all for being so welcoming to me as I've come to the society and made some friends, and I really appreciate that. So the talk that I'm going to give, it's going to be a mix of a framework for thinking about problems along with some concrete examples. But the problem that we're talking about, systems of bias in the United States, is such a big, complicated problem that I can't take it on in the depth that I wish I could. But I'm hoping that I can provide some new, fresh ideas about how to think about it. And then also we can kind of have a discussion using some of these ideas that I talk about. So I'm going to be going through like my underlying philosophy, unpacking the debate around social justice, how to model a system, and then we're going to try to explain disparity that people of color experience, and we'll see how that goes. So my underlying philosophy comes largely from the Othering and Belonging Institute, which is John Powell is in charge there at UC Berkeley. John Powell is a very prominent scholar of social justice. And I heard him speak at work. We had a community-based innovation summit, and he came and spoke, and I was moved to tears hearing him speak. And on the OBI website, it says, belonging, as OBI defines it, means having a meaningful voice and the opportunity to participate in the design of political, social, and cultural structures that shape one's life. The right to both contribute and make demands upon society and political institutions. And this is kind of a, I don't know, removed from the emotional reality of life definition, but I think it's an important definition still. But when John Powell spoke, he talked about creating a world where everyone belongs. And he talked about how belonging is a core need of all of us, no matter who we are or how we experience our life, that we want a place where we belong, where we feel safe. And he talked about how in our brains, we have something that lights up when we see another person. It's just like a part of our brain that neuroscientists have found that when we see a human face, it lights up in our brain. But something can happen where when we start to view somebody as other, we can view them as so other that that part of our brain does not light up. The part of our brain that views them as a human doesn't light up anymore, and they start to be other. And in my mind, other means someone with whom you can't connect, someone with whom you can't share like emotional I lost for, but like you can't create that kind of sense of belonging with that person. And this can have a powerful impact on our society. And so I really like this idea of othering and belonging. And I want to help build a society where everyone can feel like we belong and connect with each other. And there's some imperatives of this philosophy. One, space to build in our personal lives a space where the people around us can belong. And this is a complex personal challenge that involves unpacking our own notions of the groups with whom we can connect authentically. And it involves being authentic and sometimes leaning into the discomfort of trying to connect with somebody and understand someone who we, for whatever reason, find ourselves viewing as other. And all of us have this kind of like groups of people who we can work with and groups of people who we can't. And I think it's our mission, if you believe in this philosophy, to bring down those walls. And the second imperative is to identify and alter practices that perpetuate bias. So these might be laws and perpetuate othering. These might be laws, cultural practices, institutions, norms, etc. And all these kinds of things are structural and difficult to change as we experience them. And OBI sums this up as hard on systems, soft on people. So we're going to unpack the debate around this next. I'm just going to try and frame what I'm thinking. And so, for example, when we're looking at, this is income by race. And if you look in the teal at the top, that's Asian. and their median household income is the highest. Then it's white, not Hispanic, in dark blue below them. The average is in gray, and then down much farther below is Hispanic and Black. And so in 2020, it looks like the median household income for the Black community was around 45,000, and then the median for Hispanic was around 50,000. For white, it was above 70,000. Looks like for Asian, it's around 100,000. I do want to talk about Asian here, because sometimes people will use this evidence to say that to place blame on cultures and say, well, the Asian culture works well in the United States. But another explanation for this is that since the 90s, we've opened up our immigration policy to allow for skilled workers, wealthy engineers, and doctors from Asia who have come over. And so actually, I think if you dig into this, you can see that there is a group of poor Asians who immigrated here in like the 1800s and early 1900s. And there's also more recent immigrants who make a lot more money and who are kind of shifting this up. And they came with money when they came over here, and they came educated and skilled. And but that's one of the details I want to point out. Another consensus. Yeah. Yes, thank you. I do think that they're also really important to consider. And yeah, I'm just grabbing some charts off of the internet here to try and illustrate some things that we know for sure. But yes, I've been highly impacted personally by ideas from indigenous populations, and they have many ideas of value to contribute. So thank you for bringing that up and for pointing that out. This one is also, it's a similar breakup by race. So this is white, Black, Hispanic, and other. And this is about college degrees. And so in dark blue, you have white with no bachelor's degree. And so just overall, dark blue is your earnings. It's your median net worth in thousands of dollars. So sorry, this axis, median net worth is the y-axis. And then dark blue means no college degree. And this lighter blue is bachelor's degree or higher. So if you're white and you have a bachelor's degree or higher, you make a lot more money than any other category. And so what this is showing is even if you do have a college degree and you are Black, Hispanic, or non-white, some other way, your chances of earning as much as a white person are very low. And it's really very sad and discouraging. Another thing we can see here is housing. This is the home ownership rates by ethnicity. So white is much higher. Here we have Asian is lower than white here. And I think this is more evidence supporting the idea that it's recent immigrants who have come in that's why Asians make more money on average. But they don't have as high home ownership rates. And to me, home ownership is it's like a generational kind of thing. It's a longer term problem. And anyway, but once again, and then also health outcomes, it's a really dismal picture. This is age adjusted mortality by race and ethnicity. And the white mortality rate was lower, and Asian also here is low, but Black and Hispanic consistently higher than everyone else. So to me, this is heavy stuff. There's pretty much a consensus in the country that this is true. These disparities exist. That's the point I'm trying to make here, is that this is real. And what we want to do then is we want to explain the disparities. And I'm going to give my claim, which is these disparities are the result of structural biases. So people of color experience structural and cultural barriers that reduce their ability to accumulate wealth, be healthy, and also receive respect from their peers. Counterclaim. People who disagree with me, one claim is the disparities are a result of personal decisions and cultural attitudes. So to dig into that a little more, the counterclaim is, you might say, well, is it really structural? Or during the civil rights movement, we passed laws already that made it illegal to discriminate on the basis of race. And because of this, there's essentially no institutional inequality anymore. This is the other argument. Similarly, the anti-racism movement has largely removed racism from American culture. The difference in outcomes is due to personal decisions of individuals. And in some cases, it may be that the cultures of the minority groups are not good at producing outcomes for their people. So I'm summarizing arguments. I grew up very conservative. I was, even just 4 years ago, I was on very conservative YouTube hearing these arguments being made. And so I've kind of been on both sides of the fence with this. And I feel it's important to represent the arguments of people who disagree with me in their full strength, at least as fully as I can make them. So we can really consider the claims and think about why we think differently. And to address the counterclaims, I'm going to make 2 points. And one is we have to carefully balance personal responsibility versus external responsibility, because clearly it's not all or nothing, right? We have to take ownership of our own lives in some ways. But the problem is when you put the blame on a person for something that is actually out of their control, right? And that can really create bad outcomes for people and put them in this state of blaming themselves for problems if they believe those things that they're told, that it's their fault, right? And you can create all kinds of like depression and anxiety and all kinds of terrible situations for people. So what I'm saying, we have to be careful when we put the blame on individuals when it may actually be a system. And second, I find, I don't want to use too strong words, but placing blame on a culture, I find to be particularly poisonous. And because it's a subtle assertion, some cultures are better than others, which on conservative parts of YouTube is not made very subtly. Like there's a video where they just repeat that over and over again. Some cultures are better than others. And I kind of view this as a sense of cultural superiority. And we have to be careful with that because when you think of it that way as cultural superiority, it starts to look a lot like racism, right? When we're not talking about race, we're talking about culture, right? Because like clearly race, doesn't matter, but like we may have a superior culture. And this is trickier to debunk because the thing about cultures is they're just like people. People are complicated. We have things about us that are amazing and beautiful and things about us that are like pretty bad. All of us deal with this complexity in our lives. And when we try and compare each other as people and how much value we have as a person and like say that one person has more value than another, when you're competing in a really narrow place like sports, right? Like maybe you can say one person is faster, but when we try to make judgments about people's value as a whole, I view that as problematic and causing people to feel defective and to be ashamed of themselves and to create negative outcomes. And I think even it's a basic Christian belief that all people have inherent value. And so I think we kind of agree on that. So that's my reasoning about on this counterclaim. I want to make one other note, which is my own belief that cultural superiority is an iteration of racism. There's a lot of shaming that we do of racist behaviors, which we want them to stop. So I can understand, but it's created a lot of anger among people like conservative viewpoints because they feel like their arguments are not being listened to and instead they're just being shamed. And this anger that they feel it like we're being shamed, we're not being listened to, we're being called immoral. This anger and like what they view as self-righteousness has been very mobilizing, right? And so important to engage kindly, even if you really view what somebody's belief is as being poisonous. All right, before I go on, does anybody have any comments they want to make about this? Because this was, yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk a little more about, this is a little heavy. I want to recognize that it's a heavy topic. Remember, our philosophy is creating a world where everyone belongs. When we get into the debate, it's heavy and it's hard. And it's going to be heavy for a little longer, and hopefully we can move towards some solutions. But so when we're talking, we're going to go back to that first point about balancing personal responsibility versus the system that you live in. And you'll notice this balancing act comes to play when we debate interventions, the way we want to act in our society to create the society that we want. So for example, defund the police versus this kind of you need to stop committing crimes attitude. So one of them is thinking about the system. One of them is thinking about personal responsibility, right? Forgive student loan debt versus your own debt is your responsibility, right? And once again, like we have these kind of competing ideas. And I'm going to kind of reframe these arguments. First, I actually think there's some agreement that the outcomes are bad, and that people are suffering and they don't have to be suffering. So, and what we're really arguing is how do we change it? What's causing the suffering? We want it to go away. We kind of are there. So there is actually some agreement here. And the question is how, right? And so because the debate revolves around interventions, how should we intervene in the system to produce the good outcomes that we want? A debate about intervention presupposes an understanding of the system and why things occur. So we need a story. We need an explanation that fits with the data that we have. So to argue for an intervention, to argue that a certain thing is what you want, you have to explain this intervention will work because this is what's going on. This is why things are occurring, right? And I believe that this figuring out how things work is best done by modeling a system. And a model in this sense is, I make mathematical models, but to try and describe why things happen. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So I don't know if you're going to be able to read this. I think the text is probably too small. But this is a simple model of home loans. And we're trying to understand what happens. And there's these feedback loops. So this box up here is your average credit score. And your average credit score is affected by if you make your monthly payments on time. So your credit score goes up. And it's negatively impacted if you default or if you make late payments. And when you're borrowing, oh, and then your credit score also impacts if you get a loan, if you're able to borrow. So there's this feedback that happens where you come into the system, you want to get a home loan, and if you are able to get a home loan, then your credit score increases and you do really well. But if you're not able to get a home loan, you can't really increase your credit score and you end up stuck. And this is a simplification of the system. There's a lot more things that happen. But one of the ideas is because of people in poverty have a hard time making the monthly payments because they experience more volatility in their lives, that they can never increase their credit scores high enough to get a good interest rate that they're able to pay, and they end up stuck, right? This is simplification, right? But models are always going to be simplifications. You want to capture the general trend of what's happening and then say, if this is kind of how things are working, how should we intervene? This is a paper from someone named Donald Martin, who I worked with. And his group they looked at this and they said, let's lower the credit score threshold. So we're going to acknowledge all this feedback that's happening. And what happens is in blue, this is the average credit score of like a white population that has a little more wealth. They're more likely to pay off. And in red, this is the average credit score of a minority population that's less likely to pay off their loans. And so what they did is they said, let's just give them loans anyway in this model. What will happen? And what happened is they actually ended up with lower credit scores for this community. And they said, let's try a different intervention. Let's try increasing loan term, giving more time to pay off their loans. They can pay smaller amounts each month. And so then what happens is when they did this, you can see that in the dotted line, they adjusted loan term and the credit scores jumped up from where they were going to be for this population that was less likely to make the monthly payments in the original system, right? And so this is not proof that this intervention is going to work, that increasing loan term is going to work, but it's evidence. It's a way of saying, here's the story we're telling about the system, this feedback that we have. What if we intervene in this way, then we can create better outcomes for everybody, which is the goal. So this is kind of how modeling works. And what I want to do with all of you, and I don't know if I'm going to succeed, is we're going to try and model something together. I'm going to supply the math and you're all going to supply the ideas. about a problem that we want to try and figure out how to solve. So we'll see if we can pull this off. But I'm going to go to this website now. Uh-oh. Looks like I'm not on the internet, so that could be a problem. With the internet. I found a free one. We'll see if I can connect. Oh, well, that didn't work. So it's EV Blue Hills. All right. I need to do a mirror. Set this up. I think we have time. So. You think that because I'm younger, I'd know how to use technology, I suppose, like that's how the story goes, but it's not true. Don't believe it. It's just not doing what I wanted to do. Okay. Does anybody know how to share a screen on a Mac or something like that? Any practice? I just want to like be able to write on my screen and then also have everybody be able to see it. So I'm gonna try to unplug and plug in. See what happens. All right, well, if this doesn't work, we'll just have a discussion and we won't get to do any of the cool math. That is true. If you might need some binoculars, I guess. You're gonna. I'm on an Apple. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what happens. I keep trying to drag it over and then it keeps disappearing. All right. All right. Well, how about this? Why don't we do this? Let's try and pick a specific problem. Let's try and come to a consensus about a problem that people are interested in. And then, well, you kind of, one of the things I suggest is we could pick something related to some of those graphs I showed where we saw different disparate outcomes. You could pick an adjacent social justice problem we want to talk about. And while I'll let you all discuss it, maybe run the mic around. And while you do that, I'll try and get this figured out. How does that sound? Good? All right, let's do that. So the question you're up to is what is it you'd like to try and model, and just as a group, we're going to come up for a system, the system that's underneath it.
So this is just a random thought that came in my mind. I'm not pretending it's the best idea, but from those graphs, like how about the problem of helping folks from minority, ethnic, and racial groups who have a college degree to be able to get higher paying jobs if that's what they want in their life?
Well, I guess I have a question for DJ. I don't know if this is the time.
No.
No, all right, I'll wait. All right, because.
No way. Chris, that was awesome. Oh, you did.
A lot of the immigrants from Asia who have come with very high-paying jobs are not in an immigration situation that will get them a house loan. If you are not a permanent resident or a citizen, you cannot get a house loan. It is extremely difficult to get a house loan. So they may be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still can't get a house loan until they get a permanent residency. So it is not a sort of a glib situation. It's a very complex situation, which I think a lot of glib answers are trying to be peddled.
I missed it. Did we have any suggestions about a problem that we want to talk about?
Mary. We've had two
All right.
suggestions. I don't know. What do we do? Get more?
One was about seeing that the Hispanic or Black people with higher education are able to get jobs, see that we can help them to get the better jobs.
Okay, so maybe the problem there is like, why is it that even with college degrees, there's still a challenge getting the same income as white Americans? Okay, I'm interested in that one. Well, let's hear other thoughts, and we'll see if we get a lot of head nods.
Yeah, about that, for instance, you have, like at the beginning, you had the immigrants are doing well. Perhaps people who are willing to immigrate are maybe more curious or more enterprising. They're the sort of people that they're not happy where they are. They want to leave. They want to start over. And that's what you're selecting for. It's like psychology almost. Whereas, well, if you go to the Blacks, they didn't want to move. I mean, they got
Yeah,
the short
I
end
do
of the
think you
stick.
highlight that like a lot of Black Americans are still subject to things like that are remnants from even all the way back to slavery. That maybe perhaps some immigrants come over. My opinion about the immigrants is like from Asian countries is that many of them come over already wealthy and well educated. But I like your point about how it's hard to get a house here unless you're a citizen. But that's-
Is it psychology? Can you model that? I mean,
yeah, so
seriously.
I can make models of like I can model somebody's grit. We can just make we can invent variables that we feel might not be measurable but still have a big impact. We can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So this is another problem. I'm adding a
Yes.
problem. I really have concerns about all the high deductible healthcare systems that are out there now because Obamacare has done a good job, I think, of funding preventative care. So whatever health insurance you have, you can get shots you need and that kind of thing. But if you have a problem and your deductible is $6,000, you're probably not going to go to the doctor.
Right. So then the problem there is like, why do people of color experience different outcomes in healthcare, even regardless of income? And
I don't think it's, no. Not people of color, people who live paycheck to paycheck regardless.
it's more about poverty.
More about, and not even poverty, people who just can't afford a $400 doctor bill, which is kind of like what they are now if you have insurance because of that high deductible. Yeah. Yeah.
I think Dorothy's point, maybe it is you're trying to say like even if you are above the poverty line, technically, you can still get like wiped out by a medical bill. Is that?
Right, or avoid medical.
Yeah, not get care because it's going to financially cost them.
I have another problem. The problem is basic to our function, and it has to do with capitalism and the nature
we
of
start on
capitalism, the nature of who capitalism appeals to versus socialism, and who does socialism appeal to, the Bernie Sanders group. So now I would frame that in terms of horizontal and vertical structure of operation.
Mhm.
The horizontal is more socialist, not emphasizing leadership. Capitalism emphasizes aggressive combat in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And it addresses the payoff is for those who beat one another down in their struggle to rise above. And that's the problem of vertical hierarchy of operation versus a more civil
Yeah.
type of horizontal and less leadership orientation. And now in colleges, and especially sports oriented groups in colleges and universities, there is this very strong emphasis on vertical combat.
Yeah, thanks. As I've been dug into this myself, learning more about social justice has made me see a lot of roots in our economic system too. Actually, without going for more, why don't we jump into, we're about to have 30 minutes left, and I think I'm going to just pick for us. We're going to do the college, the disparate outcomes after college education for income. And the reason I'm picking that one is because it really did feel kind of centered on social justice. And all of these are important issues that everybody raised and prevalent. But for my purposes, I want to remain focused on social justice. So let's do that one. And we're gonna title it with a question. Why do people of color experience lower income after getting a college degree? All right. We're gonna give this a name.
Lower income than comparative white.
Yes. Yes. Lower income.
It sounds like.
Compared. Oh, yeah. Thank you. To white Americans. That's another thing about like working in social justice is you just have to constantly like recognize the imperfect and like I don't know, there's so many details that you didn't even realize about your words and the way you word things and the way you think about things. And but I think it's good. I think it's good to be doing that kind of like self-critique and thinking about things but remembering that it's about creating a world where people belong. So if you have an opportunity to help create more belonging, why don't you go for it? All right. So let's think about, we're going to make some variables and we're going to model, we're going to start with the population over here. This is, oh goodness, this is so small. Maybe I can zoom. We're going to call this white grad income. All right, and then this is going to be, we're going to make another one, which is going to be people of color, grad income. All right, so we have these two variables in our model, and we're going to say that they each have different things that impact them, And let's get a few ideas for what happens here. What are the things that in the system that surround graduation and getting jobs might be different? Yeah. Thank you. That is true.
So never mind.
Yeah.
Not graduating, but they have a degree.
these two buckets that you've set up, there's a fundamental fallacy in it because it depends on the discipline. It doesn't matter whether you're a white or a person of color, you're getting a bachelor IT degree from Stanford is going to get a damn good job versus a white getting a history of art
This
degree
is a
from.
Great point. Thank you. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to model. That was fantastic. So we had two things that might play a role. One is discipline. So like what major you go into, maybe there's a difference, right? And maybe there's a reason for that. Right? And then another thing that was pointed out is what school did you go to? Right? That one seems hefty, you know? So, and I bet there is a difference between white and people of color. So let's, I'm gonna make a variable. We're gonna say, this is gonna be prestige of college, right? We kind of believe that's going to have an impact on income, right? Prestige of college, and then I'm going to make an arrow. It's not going to let me. All right, well, like this. I'm going to make an inflow. So give me a second to write this up. This is going to be rate of. I'm set up to model this as a system that changes through time, and so I think this is more of a static model is what we're making. So we're gonna change this around a little bit. Give me a sec. Oh my goodness. It's trying. This is open source software, actually. Somebody made this, it's free. Because they really believed in the ability of system modeling to help us make sense of
got an
things.
arrow.
All right. All right. So prestige of college, and this is going to impact here and here, and they're going to be different, right? Let's think about that, right? Are they going to be? Is the prestige of the college going to be different for people of color and white people? It seems like we do think so, right? So we're going to say POC, college, prestige. And that's going to be. And let's think about why. Why? Yeah. Why? Thank you. So,
different people. Then if I go to NCCU right here in Durham, so the access I have going just across the street from NCCU to Duke changes in the same city. So.
Okay, so what issues have come up that you've raised? One is we could think about like our parents, what our parents set us up to do. So parents, education, and another thing we can think about here is where you live, right? So is that what you meant with access? Am I representing that right?
Yeah. I was thinking more of
Connections.
get a job. If someone looks at my application, they see I went to Duke, there's a likelihood of them associating that with something different than if they see that I went to, podunk school of whatever choice. Others' perception of the religiousness of my school.
Yes.
Is
Okay.
going to impact my ability.
I
to
hear
get
what
a
you're
job.
saying. So that factor you're talking about is how the world perceives these different colleges, right? How the colleges are perceived.
College ranking.
So there's actually some feedback here I want to point out, right? Which is how the colleges are perceived impacts how much income you're going to get, and how much income you get when you graduate from that school impacts how the college is perceived. right? So the feedback relationship here, I don't know exactly how to incorporate that into the model, but why don't we, it's a little tricky to do it on the spot, but because we're essentially doing the same model twice, you can see. I'm making one model for like white grad income and one model for POC grad income. And we're kind of doing the same model twice. And I'm starting to think, why don't we make one model and think about like how it operates differently when we change the variables, or like we change some external variables. I think we'll just keep the discussion going, and I'm just going to make a bad model. But it's going to be to help us start thinking these systems. And what you can do with these is you can go in and put equations on all the links, how the different things relate to each other, and then you can model through time. Right.
Financial aid.
Say it again.
Financial aid.
Financial aid. Thank you. That's huge. So want to go into that a little more, actually, talk more about how that relates to the system.
Financial aid. Well, there are several components. One, how much you get can be determined by right off the bat, whether a person of color or white, the connections you may have, and just generally speaking, how much money institutions may want to give you. That will play one factor into it. The amount of financial aid that is available that you can get, that can be based on many factors, including the school, your high school.
Yeah.
And what you have done in high school as well, or what courses were offered that you took in high school, or even the high school that you went to can play as much as part of the college you get into, which plays a part into the job you'll get.
I want to highlight, there's a lot of complexity. Thank you for digging in there. That was really interesting. Because you're highlighting some things like, is this the affirmative action law? I don't totally understand it. Like, is promoting like more financial aid for minorities in college? Is that? Does anybody know?
That in itself has its own complexity.
Okay, yeah, right. But I'm thinking of, I guess, you know, my own gaps. I'm more of a mathematician, but learning. I'm thinking about like laws that, or I guess just policies in colleges that encourage them to bring on more minorities to try and become more diverse, right? This is an intervention that was done in the past that it's now a part of the system. So, you know, the system's kind of like accumulating different interventions, and those interventions work. And this is another detail of like, we live in a complex adaptive system is the mathematical term. So when you intervene, the system adapts and changes. And so this is also how where, you know, like financial aid is an interesting place where people try to intervene and make a positive change. And like we've had these feedback effects of people are like, you don't deserve to be here. You're only here because you're a minority, and people feel like they don't belong, and like those kinds of issues. Anyway, so you just got me excited.
But just to piggyback on that, it's financial aid. There's different types of financial aids. You know, oh, we'll give you financial aid, but it's a loan, which then puts them in the negative when they graduate, as opposed to scholarships or grants. That's money freely given. Now, I was of a great benefit because my father was a Presbyterian minister, and I went to a college that was affiliated by covenant to the Presbyterian Church. So just by having a father that was a minister, I got a scholarship. You know, I didn't have to pay that back. And, you know, my undergrad, I graduated hardly owing anything because I got through on scholarships and grants and stuff like that. I did not have to take out the type of financial aid that were loans. So the type of financial aid also, I think, has an impact and a bias behind that too.
Right. I'm still like confused about how to connect financial aid to the system that we're making, because it seems like sometimes it has a positive effect and sometimes it has like a negative or a mixed effect. And so
Reducing to what you said, loans versus free. Because if you have a loan, then that limits the job that you might be willing to take after college, because you're immediately paying off the loan. You have to take whatever
pressure. Thank you. That is awesome. I love that. That was so cool. All right. Let's say financial aid as loans. All right. I really liked that. And we're going to say that that creates a pressure to take a job. And then we're gonna key that in. All right, and then if we do free financial aid, right? This impacts how. Oh, that's not how colleges are perceived. That's going to be income. Well, it's not letting me delete the link, so I'm just going to leave it. All right, but that's going to affect income. And then free financial aid, how would we connect that to the chart? Oops. Oops. Did I just crash it? All right, we're back. Okay. Yeah, so let's think about free financial aid. How does that connect? If you just get to go for free, is what? So I guess if you're given a scholarship, yeah, that's what I should rewrite this to. How does that impact your income after you graduate? I'm trying to connect it to the model. I don't know either. Right.
Have more flexibility with the job.
Right. There we go. Mm-hmm.
It gives you greater flexibility with your discipline. It gives you greater flexibility because since you have no debt, then you can take a greater amount of time to decide what job you want to have.
Oh yeah, love that. All right, so we're going to connect it. Now, normally in these models, we would do a positive and a negative impact, right? So like scholarship would be, it would decrease your pressure to take a job. And financial aid as loans would increase your pressure to take a job quickly, right? Okay. Any other, let's zoom out, big picture here. We're thinking about income when you graduate, why these things are different. We've gone into like the prestige of your college. We've gone into financial aid that you can get. And can we think about anything else? Like what other factors are there? There's many factors, right, that impact income. What else can we think of?
Well, somebody mentioned a major. I mean, you'd have to get the data to find out if different ethnic groups picked different
Right.
or maybe even, okay, I'm going to free float here, go like back to elementary school and maybe teachers didn't expect as much math and science ability in kids that from minority groups unless they were Asian. And then they don't go into engineering at NC State and they don't get big paying jobs.
Yes, thank you. I think, yeah, you're talking about some research. I feel like I've seen like sociology research where they've looked at like, I think it's as early as grade 2 or something like that, that you start to see differences that they believe are created by teachers' expectations of what students can do. So yeah, I really like that. I'm gonna try and add that in. So what if we add this in as like, I don't know, like propensity of major to make money. I don't know. Propensity of major to make money. And then we're gonna also add in, how could we describe what you're talking about in elementary school?
Early education expectations affecting later abilities or what would you call that when you kind of root somebody along a certain path? In some countries, they do that intentionally, and maybe sometimes there's unintentional ways people are steered to or away from certain career paths.
Yeah.
Track. Yeah, track.
Also, I've many times it's pointed out to me, it's who you have an example in your community or whatever, that becomes, oh, I could do that. You know, I've heard of lots of people,
Yeah,
seeing
representation,
the
maybe?
very first, woman astronaut, all of a sudden women now think, oh, I can go into space, and I remember, my parents always lamenting that, oh, they wish they knew people that could help me, and it was always this idea that it's who you know and all that. And to build on that, going back to your thing, is the people that are doing the hiring, who owns those businesses? They might have the bias too.
Very nice.
Recommendations.
Yeah.
What used to be called the old boy net.
Mhm.
The income you get in your first job is highly dependent on the kind of recommendations you get coming out of school from faculty members. And somebody at a high-paying company will give much more credence to a recommendation from somebody they know at that school.
Mhm.
And I think for a minority member to get the kind of recommendations that would lead to a high job, they're less probable to get that than a white applicant who is tied into that network, who
Right.
knows the people who know the people.
Yeah, this is sad, and you and Blue are both talking about like, I guess, social capital maybe is what it's called sometimes, right? Like your connections, your network, your community,
Exactly.
and not being connected to. There's a recent study. It was huge. It was in the New York Times, where they figured out that if you are poor and you have like a friendship with someone who's wealthy, that your social mobility, your probability of social mobility is much higher. And to me, this connects back to John Powell about like connecting with other people and creating belonging, right? And bringing down barriers between the rich and the poor, of believing that people who make a lot less money than you are just as capable of connecting with you and providing value and like meaning in your life, and viewing them as your equals, right? Even if they make a lot less money, and bringing down this, and because it seems that this could help us cross this divide of as we create more community and belonging, that we can help create more social mobility. And I want to also say that, like, these are not my ideas, what I'm saying now. This is highly influenced from the Black community, and they're examples of community and what it means to connect, and also from Indigenous people and their like deep ties with each other. I think my opinion is that our white Western culture has a lot to learn about how to connect authentically and create networks of support for each other that these communities have in some ways mastered. All right, I just went off on a tangent. But let's kind of tie that in a little bit. So maybe I'll do social capital. We'll just put them all into one. All right. Probably time to wrap up. All right. So to close this up, like I said, grew up conservative. My dad at the table would be talking about the problems in poverty. In my church, I did go out and like worked with some like Mormons that lived in the projects and stuff like that, and kind of engaged with it a little bit. And as I thought about the systems as a kid, as I listened to my dad discuss them at the dinner table, I sort of threw my hands up. I was like, we even make this model here, and it's like, oh, it's so complicated. And it feels like there's not a solution. And as someone who's been studying modeling and systems in school, I have become profoundly optimistic that using these tools of like putting together some equations and coming up with stories that are based in reality, based in the way that things actually happen, we can have interventions that are better than the interventions that we've had. I'm not going to say that they're right, but I feel like a lot of times we struggle to get behind policies because we feel like they're a slap on, they're a Band-Aid. You're like, that's not the root of it. But I do feel that if we can model a little more complexity than we have in the past, incorporate a lot more of these elements, run some simulations about what would work if this is the way that the system works, we can have policies that are more likely to succeed, more likely to create equity and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you, DJ. That's interesting exercise to take part in and very informative, thought-provoking. I think there was enough interaction there to not have it questions and answers, or do we want questions and answers?
No, it's too late to do question and answer. It really is 2:52. It's 2:52. It's too late to do
Okay.
question and answer.
Well, our baskets are being passed. As you know, we're an all-volunteer organization, depending on the generosity of our members and friends. Do we have any announcements?
Yes. Let me go ahead and jump in there, and because Mara has one that she wanted us to hear. From Mara, she said next Sunday, she's suggesting that we have a short video discussion that will tie into Women's History Month. And she doesn't have the video nailed down yet, but she'll let us know what that's going to be. So.
Thank you. Mike?
Okay, for more discussion on this topic, Anna Washington, who many of you know, has salons once a week on Saturday, and her salon discussion Saturday 18th, I believe, is going to be on The Hidden Toll of Racism. It's a book by Linda Villarosa. So that's Saturday, the 18th. Come on by. She's on Macaulay Street. It's 2:00. I'll mail.
Yeah, where is that?
On Macaulay Street, 305. And I'll mail this to the group. And oh yeah, she wants to RSVP. She doesn't want any walk-ins. She tries to hold it to about 20 people or fewer. So I'll forward this if you want to pursue the discussion. The topic is hidden toll of racism.
Okay.
Saturday.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Any others? Up?
Jennifer?
Just a quick announcement for the Change for Change. We're supporting the Transitions Life Care. So just any change you have, please give. They're a great organization and we want to support them this quarter. So thank you.
We also accept credit cards. Just drop your credit card in and we'll return it next week.
Anyone else?
I miss joys and concerns because my life is in disarray. And so I want to just mention my little joy right now. So Tuesday, I did move to Galway Ridge, the retirement community at Farrington Village. And I'm kind of out of whack, but I was determined to get here today and eventually I did. So it's really good to be back with you guys. Thanks.
For those of you who are on Zoom, that was our own Mary Lockhart.
Joining the
What?
Chatham
Atish?
County crowd. You're joining the Chatham County crowd now. Atish?
Yeah, those of you who chose not to go to Asheville missed a fabulous performance by Solomon.
Solomon will take autographs after today's meeting.
Okay. Anybody else? Any more?
Anybody else?
Salman, do you have closing words or a little
All right.
bit of wisdom?
First, I found it interesting. I'd like to thank our speaker for this afternoon as to how closely my completely off the cuff opening and closing words fit so closely with the subject at hand. Weird. Next, I'd like to thank those individuals, since I was speaking of friendship, that supported our show in Asheville, that completely surprised me by being out there in the audience. Chris and Jane, Todd and Beth, Atish and Christina, Fred and Mara. I looked out in the audience and there they were. And so I wanted to thank them for their support and their taking their time and doing that. I hope it was worth the money and the time you took. Thank you. One final reminder about friendship and humanity as you look around this room and as I experience for myself in going out into the world and trying to make things a little bit better, is that I realize that it is not just about going out into the world and making the world a better place, but that in learning these things, in making these connections, these friendships, and these people, in my experiences in Asheville and getting to know some of the folks, is that there is a reciprocal thing that goes on, and that it is not just about me making the world a better place, but about becoming a better person. And I think we all do well to remember that as well, that we are also on a quest to become better people. Thank you.
So thanks to our speaker, DJ, Solomon for opening and closing words, John for being a greeter, and the refreshments we're going to enjoy with from John and Marge. And have I gotten everybody? Okay. And Chris as our technician here. So our meeting is over, but our fellowship continues. So everybody join us for refreshments and conversation.
Bye, guys.